Good news, folks. Atari has just released a new video game system called the 2600 Plus. It plays all the classic Atari 2600 games as well as the newer Atari 7800 games. So you may be asking yourself, is this something that I'd be interested in buying? Well, I'm going to take a look at some of my collection here and then try to justify why I may or may not be interested in buying this system. My name is Sean and you're watching 300 Baud. Let's go ahead and get started. So here's a few items from my Atari collection. Some of them are actually unintentional. Anytime I come across an Atari 2600, I try to pick it up, or even a 7800. So I've got like 3 7800s and 3 or 4 2600s, because you never know when you might need another one. So this original Atari 2600 4-port, which sold around 1980 to 1982, this system was originally sold by Warner Communications under the Atari Incorporated or Atari Inc. Company who did this one. And then later we had Atari Corporation, which would have been the Jack Tramiel era, because after Jack Tramiel bought Atari from Warner Communications. So this is Atari Corporation. And a lot of these systems, or actually all of these systems here, this is Infogrames, which later became Atari SA. So Atari has gone through several owners and has changed over the years. So why don't we take a look at some of these flashback systems and see what is unique or special about each of them. This is the first one I purchased, and this dates back to about 2004. Now this would have been very early after Atari Corporation had failed, and they sold off all their stuff, and I think it was Hasbro ended up buying out Atari. And you can see this one then Hasbro ended up selling to Infogrames. So you can see here there's an Infogrames symbol. Infogrames is a French company, and they have the US subsidiary, which is the Atari Interactive. So when I saw this was a very exciting thing to buy. Now, it's kind of cool because it has the look and the feel of an Atari 2600 controller. There's no console here. It just plugs straight into your video, audio inputs on your television, and it plays the games. Now, the games don't really match the 2600, and that is because I believe this is an NES on a chip design. The games have been reprogrammed to simulate Atari 2600 games on a Nintendo. So they're similar, but not exactly the same. As you can see here, I paid $19.99 for this one. And like I said, this was just a very exciting system for me to get because Atari had dried up for about 6 or 7 years. There was absolutely nothing you could buy after the Jaguar for hardware. It was gone. And then we moved into something a little bit newer. I believe this is from 2002. This is the original Atari Flashback. Now, what is interesting about the Flashback is it has the look of an Atari 7800, which I have down here. Now, it is a much cheapened down version of a 7800, but it's, again, it was new Atari hardware for the time. Very exciting. I probably paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 to $40 for this one. I can't find the price on it. But you can see it was packaged with 20 games. They included the never-before-released Saboteur, which was a big deal at the time. It has, looks like they say, actually it says 2 Atari 7800 inspired joysticks. Now this is something the new Atari 2600 Plus does not have, is the Atari 7800 inspired joysticks. It's coming with a Atari 2600 inspired CX40 joystick. Another thing to note with this is you can see they started playing around with the Fuji symbol a little bit. They kind of flared it out at the bottom. I'm not a real fan of that. You can also see here the Atari, how they did the same thing. They put the A in the middle of Atari, was a Fuji symbol. I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't like that branding. Now the Flashback 2, this is kind of what people are talking about now, what they think the new Atari 2600 Plus should be. I don't agree with that. So the Flashback 2 is, for all intents and purposes, is real Atari silicone. They consolidated everything down to a single chip apparently, and this is an Atari 2600 deep down inside. It has all the limitations of a 2600. This particular system, you could put a cartridge port in it. Although to get one in there, you'd have to like do some major modifications to the console. I've never done that with mine. I kind of like this system because it has the look of a 2600-ish, but it has these buttons that don't match the original 2600 design. But it's a pretty nice system. It's kind of cool to have it in my collection. I'll do a better review on this one in the future, but the games for this should be pretty much an identical match to the 2600 version, because it, for all intents and purposes, is a 2600 from what I understand. And then we get into the newer flashbacks. It looks like I skipped a couple of flashbacks. So here I've got the Flashback 5, and now they went to 92 games built in. Another change is that this one has wireless joysticks. That's probably why I bought this, was because of the wireless. I thought would be nice to have, although they're not. It uses infrared joysticks, so anything blocks the light, it's not gonna work. Let's see here. This has an M Network game built in, which is kind of cool. So it's not just Atari. Yeah, nothing really all that exciting about this system. It does have ports where you can plug in joysticks into the front of the system. Again, I'm not too crazy about that because it doesn't really match the design of an Atari. Yeah, this particular system is also an At Games. The first one that I showed you here is, as near as I can tell, is not an At Games. I'm not sure who manufactured this one, but this is your At Games, which became very popular with all these Flashback consoles, although I don't believe At Games made all of the Flashback consoles, nor did they design them all. I also have the Flashback 9, but I want to take this more in an order. So the Flashback 6. So now we get into 100 built-in games. This one, I bought this particular unit because it came with the paddle controllers. Initially, I was like, I couldn't figure out why I was having trouble with the games, and a lot of it just has to do with the way the system interacts with the controllers. It does not work well, so it's kind of laggy, I guess you could say, and the accuracy is way off. At some points it turns, and the pedals will respond very quickly, and other times you have to turn more into them. So it's just the pedals really stink on this system. I'm not sure if the paddle controllers on this one are compatible with the original Atari or not. I think they are, but I'm not positive about that. That's something I'll have to investigate in a later video when I do a more exhaustive review of these Flashback systems. Again, this is this one should be, this is an At Games system. As far as the games go, it's got 100. They're looks like mostly Atari games. It's kind of cool. It's got Millipede and Centipede in there. I'm not sure if that is the 2600 version of those two, or if they put in like a rewrite of that. So a lot of these systems, they unfortunately would like rewrite the games. So they weren't the exact match of what you were expecting to get. But pretty cool system. It's got a lot of games in there. The paddle controllers are a huge letdown though. And then we get into the Flashback Gold over here. So the Flashback Gold, a lot of the reason I got this system, well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, this one, they finally moved to an HDMI port on this Flashback 8 Gold. Now, what I don't like is the Flashback 8 port is on the side of the system, so you have this cable going around, which I'm not fond of that. I don't like this round edge here. I don't like the push buttons. I don't like the controllers out the front. So there's a lot of things I don't like. One thing I do like about this particular system is they started packaging in some more of the Activision games, and here we even have a Parker Brothers game, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so what's really nice about this one is that it does have, actually this one I don't believe has the SD card on the side. It does not. I don't remember how many games are on this either. But 40th anniversary, so this is a 10-year-old system. Not sure how many games are on here. Let's take a look. Oh, there we go. 120 built-in games. So pretty good collection of games, and not too shabby. So after the Flashback 8, I got the Flashback 9. The Flashback 9, this is the one that introduces the SD card at the side of the system, which is very nice. It also has an HDMI output out the back of the system, so no more cables running around. This one's got the wired joysticks, which are also very nice. One thing I've noticed about these particular sticks on any of these Flashbacks is that the handles are very hard. Unlike the original Atari, which had a little bit of a rubber, a little bit of softness to the handles, these are hard, so these will actually kind of hurt your fingers after a while. But what's really nice about this, because it has, it's got 110 built-in games, but the SD card, with the SD card, you can flash the ROM on this system, load an alternative ROM into it, which will then allow you to add additional ROMs to the system, or basically it'll load them from the SD card. So mine has like just about every game made for the Atari is on the SD card, and I've got it actually hooked into my HD TV upstairs. So it's a pretty nice console. So that brings the question, for somebody like me who already has all of these Flashback systems, I've already got HDMI output, I already have the ability to load other games into the system. Why in the world would I buy the new Atari 2600 Plus? Well, there's a few reasons. The first is the system, the actual design of the system. It looks like the original 4-port system from Atari, but it's 80% scaled. So instead of something like this, maybe it's something like that. The other is the lack of a cartridge port. On all these little plug-and-play systems, none of them have a cartridge port. And that alone is one of the reasons why I never purchased the newer Atari VCS system, basically the AMD computer in a console, because that totally misses the mark with the demographic of Atari players. Atari players grew up with cartridges. So if you wanted to play a game, you would have a box of cartridges, and you would grab your game and plug it into the system, and it gave you that very tactile feel of playing the system. And then when you were done, you'd pull your game and grab another cartridge and put another cartridge. And just the sound of these plastic cartridges hitting the top of that Atari brings back memories, which you cannot get or replicate on a system like this. So that is one of the main reasons why I'm really excited about the new Atari 2600 Plus, because it really hits that nostalgic value. Now, some of the downsides of that is that something like a Harmony cart is probably not going to work, because the new Atari 2600 Plus is basically, it's a more modern computer system that's pulling the ROMs and emulating the Atari hardware and then playing them. Where something like a Harmony cart is going to have like its own submenu, and that menu is going to draw down, select the game. It'd be interesting to see, but I kind of doubt that'll work. So that's one reason I'm really excited about the new Atari 2600 Plus. The looks and the cartridge, the feel of it, the sounds, that it's all going to bring it back. The other thing that does excite me quite a bit is just the ability to play with the 7800 games. So the 7800 is quite an improvement in graphics capability over the original 2600. The 7800 in many ways can outshine an NES. So in conclusion, I would have to say that the new Atari 2600 Plus is essentially an Atari 7800 that is packaged to look like the classic Atari 2600, because this is the recognizable system for most people. Having the cartridge is a big plus for those of us who own cartridges, but if you don't own the Atari 2600 cartridges, then something like the Flashback would be more in line. Now, the new Flashback 10 looks more like a miniaturized version of this little guy, but does not have the cartridge port. But for me, I want a system that takes the cartridges, and I'd also like to see Atari, and I'm starting to see Atari now is starting to market games. So they have a new Berserk that's enhanced, that works not only on the Atari 2600 Plus, but also the original Atari 2600. So if we were to take a look at Atari's website, what you're going to find is they're starting to understand their customer base a little bit better. The products they're releasing are now more of what I'm interested in buying. And you know, what I'd really like to see is they're starting to publish some of the games. Like they got an improved version of Berserk. They've got the 10-in-1 cartridge for the 2600 plus, which is nice. Another thing that's kind of cool is a lot of these products are backward compatible. You know, 2600 plus joysticks work on a 2600. The paddle controllers work vice versa. You can switch them between systems. The games are vice versa as well. They'll go on either system. But what I'd really like to see is maybe some new collections of enhanced games for the 2600 plus that are really Atari 7800 games. So if they were to take some of these games that you find on these old systems, the 120 games or whatever, and re-release them with improved graphics, basically reprogramming them for a 7800 capability, that would be very, very cool. So if you're listening, Atari, which I doubt you are because my channel's too small, is make some 7800 games that run on the new 2600 plus, or well, run on an old 7800. So my final thoughts on the new Atari 2600 plus. Would I buy one? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I already placed my order. I even got a 15% discount. So the $130 Atari 2600 plus with shipping and taxes cost me $130, which is not too bad. It's a lot more expensive than these old systems here, but nothing is cheap anymore. So for the price, I think it was very reasonable. Also, back in the day when you bought an Atari like this, they were somewhere around $100, and that was back in the 80s, which is a lot more money now. It's probably more in the area of 400 now. But to pay $130 for the new Atari is not too bad. So I'm very interested in seeing what this new Atari 2600 Plus brings. I want to know how the feel is, you know, how does it compare in looks. Another thing that I kind of doubt is, you know, this is a lighter Atari than the original Heavy Sixer, but even this has got a little bit of heft. So some of these flashback games, when you plug the joysticks in, you got to be careful with the system because they're very light and they'll move around. But you know, like this one, the joysticks can plug in and you can yank on it a bit. Nothing's going to happen to the Atari. So there'll be some interesting things to discover when that new system comes out. So that's about all I've got to say about this little collection I've got here on the old Ataris, the 2600, the 7800, and that I'm very excited for the new 2600 Plus, and I really like the direction that Atari is going. So if you enjoy this video, this type of content, why don't you consider subscribing to my channel? It's absolutely free, just takes a second. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and that you will join me in the next video. Until then, take care of yourself, and goodbye.